Welcome back, everyone. It's been a hot minute since my last check-in video. It's amazing how time flies, so I figure it's time to tell you what we're up to. As you can maybe tell, it is raining and has been for days and days and days. And as you can see by all the fields all around us, the owner of this property has, for the first time in 22 years, plowed all these pastures and put in a crop of potatoes.
Lots of potatoes.
So, well, sure you know what plowed dirt looks like, but that's it. Apparently 155 acres, 155 hectares, or like 500 acres of land, all potatoed up in these hills. So that was a little bit frustrating for about a week there in the proximity of us, or very close to where we are. We heard teams of tractors with diskers, rototillers, and then planting machines, as well as all the guys coming through here and finishing up the edges where the machine can't get to. But no complaints. It's been quiet for the last week, with the exception of the rain, which is a little bit of a nuisance for making video because it's drumming on the roof, as you'll hear in a bit. And we've been keeping busy. Care Bear's having a good time washing underwear by hand in the underwear washing sink. Making a squash and carrot soup today. So it's about a 2-hour drive to Bogata. So I went with a friend of ours who we met, who lives close to Bogata, and gave him $25 to drive me around for the day. And so we went to immigration. That was actually really quick and easy. I'd submitted our paperwork for our extension online some weeks earlier, but they go through them chronologically in the order they were received. And so, and there's lots of immigrants from Venezuela and countries to the south, and so they're backlogged. But just a little howdy-doody. Please put this through because my vehicle import permit is going to expire and I can't get it extended without my vehicle, without the visa extension. So they put that through really quick. And then while we were there in Bogata, I again tried to find shock absorbers that would fit the truck, but I can't find anything of anything that looks like any good quality shock absorber. There's Gabriel and Monroe shocks, although they're a little bit smaller than what I have on now, and they're twice the price. Twice the price as Amazon USA. It just boggles my mind how they get away charging that much. Why the price of shock absorbers is double. For context, the price of the part number for the shock that they have in stock, or that's the best one I can find, it would cost me about $115, $120 in comparable currency, and there in the US I can get it for $60. So I don't know why it's double. It's a little bit baffling, but anyway, I was in Bogata, so I figured I'd try and do something productive, and I did try and find some shock absorbers while we were there. And I am trying to put together a video here. I've gone through all of my bins and tried to dig out all the props that I need for show and tell to make my point for the next video, which will be how to power all sorts of electronics from DC without the need of the power bricks with which they come. Unfortunately, one of the key pieces I was looking for cannot find. I spent 6 hours organizing and looking through all of my bins, even through the weird storage places where it should not have ever been. But I digress. I can't find it, so I'm going to rewrite the script a little bit just to avoid that and do my best to show you what I can. On the topic of script, something I've said in some live chats, live streams in the past, that I'm struggling more and more with scripts, or rather speaking in a straight line and hitting all of my points. And what ends up happening is I have 15 takes of one segment, one point I'm trying to make, and they all have their good points, they all have their bad points, and none of them have all of the points. And inevitably I miss a point, and then somebody tells me in the comments, you should have done this or that, and it's like, I know. So in an effort to be better at making videos, I went out and bought myself this happy family. Look how happy they are. And this picture frame, and all I needed from that was this piece of glass. And then I took our our old trusty field monitor with the small rig cage on there, and the hood that is supposed to be for that, and then I used the backing board from the picture frame to make a little mask there as well. And as you can see, I now sort of have a teleprompter. And then I found some software that apparently should scroll this by. Now this is just cheapo glass, although it is actually glass and not Lexan or whatever. And I don't know if you'll be able to see that. A little bit of a ghosting, or 2 layers of text ghosted on top of each other. And that's because it's reflecting off both the front and the back of the glass, because this is not proper beam splitting glass. But as you can see, welcome back everyone. In this video I show you how to convert all the things to DC power. So I feel it's necessary for some of our newer viewers to give you some context and blah blah blah. And so anyway, I'm going to try this out for the next video, see if I can put out a video with a lot less frustration. And I did do some testing already to see if that glass causes any sort of degradation in the video quality, if you can see the text or if you can see anything out of the normal, and it seems to work really well. I can't see any difference between the glass being there and not. So okay, this short clip just to test if you can see the glass or see the difference in quality with the glass in place or not. So this is the glass in place, and this now is no glass at all, just the camera straight into the lens. Thanks for watching. And I've been doing some other preparations for other videos, as well as some other things here. I was contacted by one of our viewers. I'm not sure if he's a subscriber, I hope not, but asked me to do some ESP32 development work for them. Just reading some basic sensor data and sending it to a JSON API. And so I put a few days working on that and sent them some early code, and then they've since ghosted me. So that's unfortunately sad, but it did inspire me, or require me, to dig out my drawer of ESP32 stuff, and that reminded me about these things. I have made some videos of these a couple of years ago while we were in Mexico. These are the TTGO ESP32 LoRa long range radio with a battery, 18650 single cell on there, as well as a GPS receiver. And that reminded me that I used to have with our old MoFi 4500, it had a GPS receiver in it, and I was polling it and getting the data from that. And then then I had the data stored, and I had a a track of every place, every night we stopped and slept, it would record our position. And I thought that was pretty cool. And we had that for the first 3 years maybe, that we were traveling. But then MoFi offered us the new 5500, and so we upgraded to that, but lost the GPS functionality. And so, that all being said to say that once I dug out my boards, I got this one powered up, wrote some quick code for it, glare, story of my life, which just gets the GPS position and writes it to InfluxDB as well as Blink. And so on my phone here, whoops, I've got our GPS position on the phone, kind of interesting, and our elevation. And then also on our big monitor, the reason I'm more interested in elevation, I haven't really mentioned, 2,873 meters presently, is because of air pressure, oxygen density for the sake of the dog. So I've been more mindful of that lately. I want to also just point out here quickly. Oh boy. So, not really implemented properly yet, but I've got a heat map now in Grafana on our dashboard. So we haven't moved very much since I've got this going, but there's Columbia finally. And if I zoom all the way in, there you can see the heat map of all of the places we've been so far, which is nowhere. Now obviously that's just me and not the truck, or rather the truck and not me, but thought that was pretty interesting to get that going. I thought that would be a good one to include in the Grafana graphing video for our dashboard. Had a couple members out of the blue kind of comment that they missed our dashboard video, and that's because it doesn't exist, because when I put out that series of videos, it was kind of a flop and nobody was interested in it. The videos didn't do very well, and so I just let it be. And because that was going to be such a big video, I tried a couple times and just wasn't going to be worthwhile. But I'm going to try again one day, and so I thought that would be one of the example data points that I could demonstrate. Okay, and lastly, Casual Roses is one of our YouTube channel members, and he's just asked me if I would do a tutorial on crimping RJ45 connections, given the problems that a lot of people are having. And I'm going to do my best here. This handheld camera is not going to be great, so I'm going to clamp it onto this box and try and show you the best I can. Great. So, a little bit of an overview, very basic. You're going to need a crimper. If you don't have one, get a pass-through variety that cuts the connections, or rather cuts the excess wire to length. I will demonstrate that in a moment. The first set of connectors I got and used in the video, or the first package, were I believed were passed through, but they were not, in fact. And so that made it a little tougher in the video, but whatever. Now, in my younger life, I'd crimped probably in the thousands of RJ45s and never used pass-through back then. Also, the wire was thicker and solid, copper, and was quite a bit easier to work with, in my opinion. But whatever. Okay, so I like to trim the wire. If most of the cheap kits you buy on Amazon include this little stripper deal, which has a spring-loaded tension thing and a little flat blade, and you just put that on there and then spin it around and it cuts it really nice. And the blade's depth is limited to only cut the shielding. or rather the insulation, the jacket. And then you want to straighten all these out, and I just give them a little bit of pinching, a little bit of rocking, a little bit of pulling. Then arrange them in order. Orange stripe, orange. Green stripe, blue. Blue stripe, green. Brown stripe, brown. And I'll kind of splay them out or fan them out in this way to try and coerce them or coax them into staying in the order you want. Now, these crimp connectors, RJ45 crimps, the better quality ones in my opinion, come with this little guide that keeps the wires in order and arranged the way you want as you feed it into the connector. So you bring them all together like this. And then feed it into this guide tool, or guide jig. And this takes a little bit of wiggling, so it makes you look like a doofus on camera. The other way to do it, and what I actually did in the videos, because I was sitting on the roof of the truck, is you can just feed them through one by one. That does make it a little easier. Now is maybe a good time while I'm fiddling with this to mention the wire gauge. Most high quality wires, or if you want a really good connection, you would probably use really thick wire gauge. That is, the wires are thicker and have more conductor in them, and that would be preferential. And for that reason, most of these kits support a wider range of wire gauges. And that's the problem I had in the first place, in the first video, is these pass-through connections have a little bit of slack in them, or rather it's a hot dog down the hallway situation. So they're not really as tight as they could be, and that doesn't sound like a problem. It should make it easier to feed all this stuff through there, right? But it is a problem, and I'll show you why in just a second here. Here we go. So now I've got all those wires through the little guide. Orange stripe, and this gives you the opportunity to check everything. Orange stripe orange, green stripe blue, blue stripe green, brown stripe brown. And now the cute trick that these things do, I'm just going to trim these wires ever so slightly, kind of off camera, into the garbage here. So there it is, kind of all flushed up. Now, the trick with this thing, or the trick these do, is you can pull this little guide all the way to the front, and it holds them all in the right order. And then you get your connector, and I'll probably just put in a phone shot here, but at the front you can see, to make room for larger gauge wires, they've staggered these up and down and up and down to make room, because there wasn't enough room widthwise. And that's going to play into this story here in a second. Anyway, when you push it through, all the wires magically come through the front of the connector here. And the Starlink jacket, because it's shielded in fat rubber outdoor gauge grade cable, it's a little bit fat. It doesn't quite fit in there easily, but with a little pinch you can get her through. And then now you can double check your wire pattern again if you'd like. Orange stripe orange, green stripe blue, blue stripe green, brown stripe brown. Get it all in there as tight as you want. You might have noticed I've got this grounded shielding wire twisted together. It's debatable or arguable whether you should ground one end or both ends. I grounded both and had no problems. There are proper crimp connectors that have a separate little almost like a strain relief that goes around the jacket here, and that you'd crimp, or rather pinch this wire in that, but all I did was wrapped it through the little slot here at the back. Anyway, that's beside the point a little bit. Pull all your wires through. You can maybe see my green one there is a little short, so it's probably bound up in there. Just gonna grab some tweezers and pull it out a little bit. Didn't help, but doesn't matter. Then you get your crimp tool, put this in there, and you'll see all the wires poking out the back, except mine all folded over. Now I'm working with just a little stub here. This is the connection from the dish itself, and the wire that was inside the dish. Don't really have much to work with there, so I'm doing it on the white end, but it's kind of the only scrap chunk I have handy. Okay, now through the connector again, or rather through the crimper. This lines up, and the wires should all come through the back end. Whoops, I'm upside down. The wires should all come through the back end here. Yeah, see that? And seat it in all the way, and then these all go flying. Now what you can do if you're not using a scrap of wire is make it 3 inches long, and then pull them all together and twist them all into a bundle, and then when you cut it, or crimp it rather than wire danglies and little bits falling everywhere, you've just got one little thing of wire, one little bundle all wrapped together. Okay, that did not go well. I still had 2 wires fold over on the blade again. This is why I look great in video, but in reality, I'm also human. Okay, so as you can hopefully see, the wires have all been cut off flush with the front of the connector. I like to get in there with some magnification and make sure there aren't any strands touching one to the other. Now, what I did to ensure or to promote a really good connection, I'll maybe explain with this thing. No, I can't. These connectors have the large flat end that normally interfaces with the appliance, and then on the inside there's 2 or 3 forks, usually offset such that there's a better chance of one of them hitting the wire. And that was a criticism I got in the video, that I was using cheap connectors that were only 2-tined forks. In fact, they're all 3-tined, but I forgive them. So anyway, what I did to promote a good connection, and the reason the connection might fail is because the wires in the Starlink cable are actually pretty thin, and I forgot to do this. I got my calipers here to show you, and I'd forgotten. I'll get this little scrap from the garbage. So turn this on, 0. These wires are 0.89. Let's call it 0.9. Yeah, 0.9 millimeters diameter, and that's a little bit thin. I'm not sure the wire gauge offhand of what that is. I might look it up, put it on screen, but that's a little bit thin for these connectors. Hot dog down the hallway, as I said. And so what I did to promote a connection and make a better likelihood, or a higher likelihood, that those wires are going to connect and interface with the little three-legged forked thing, is I put it back in the connector. Of course, you can make sure it's really seated, but then what I did to fix mine was put a little tension on the wire and rock and kind of stretch the connector within reason, and that will, you know, cause those wires to pull. When the fork comes down to pierce it, it'll pull and really, hopefully, make a good connection. So that's that. I forgot, or I didn't care, didn't want to waste one, because this is a wasted connector. But if you're going to buy a set, I'd recommend getting a package. They're often sold in combo deals with, you know, the crimper, the cheapo wire stripper, a handful of the connectors themselves, and these little rubber jackets. You put that on the wire first, and then it comes up. Do I have one handy? No, but I'm sure you guys have seen those. It just protects the little tine on the connector so that you can pull it through bundles of wire or other tangled messes and not tear the little retaining clip off your plug. Now, side note, I forgot if I mentioned this. My original set that I bought, because I left all my networking stuff at home, I didn't bring anything with me, so I bought all this new. The set I bought with the crimpers, the ends, and the everything came with non-pass-through connectors. That is, there was no holes in the end, but they did include the little wire guides that I demonstrated. Now that was a little bit of a disappointment. I wanted the punch-through ones because they looked to be a lot easier, and they are. So then I ordered a second container of 50 of these, which do have punch-through provisions, but they didn't include the little guides. So my advice would be to get a set with the punch-through connector that has the blade that cuts the excess wire. Make sure they include the little guides, pass-through connectors, be sure they're pass-through, and the jackets and everything. If you can't find a set that includes it all, order them separately. That was 15 minutes. I hope you didn't have to sit through. Alright, I hope none of you are still watching, but that's my 5-cents tutorial on crimping RJ45s. I got to get back to it here and try and put a video together, so I'll get back to that. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for your support. Thank you, Curious George, for our Starlink service yet again. I don't know what that guy's made of, but thank you very much. See you next time.